Hello, ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between. We are DebateSensei, all right? And we are going to be talking about space junk this time. What we do is we take all of the topics that are people are talking about now, or that are just sort of contentious, debatable things that we think might come up in a competitive debate round in a college tournament, and we kind of discuss the strategy, technique, and everything like that. All right. Okay.
And this week we get a riveting topic:
Space
junk.
Space junk. We got Matt, Tim, Jared. So here we go. Nice. Okay, so getting started. We always got to start with like understanding the topic. Now, and usually when you do that, it's nice to have a sample topic to kind of, see how the phrasing of the resolution might be crafted. So here's a really good example here. This one was taken from a previous tournament. This was NPDA Nats. All right, 2023 round 5 of NPDA. United States should launch a program to substantially reduce space debris.
Nice.
Yeah, and I doubt that one single team actually talked about space debris at all at the national tournament, but that's okay. We get to talk about space debris.
What do you think they talked about?
They had their own specific case. I know for certain that SDSU ran anti-blackness on this topic. How? I'm not sure, but they won, so
Okay.
Not they went. Like there's lots of very interesting critiques. I'm like, I don't get how that links there at all. I'm like, yeah, that's what we're really good at, finding links to things.
I'm trying to make a blackness space connection because I feel like the blackness of space, there's something there. Anyways.
So what's space debris, Matt?
Space debris, it's junk. It's space junk. It's stuff spinning around the planet that's gonna destroy the things we send into outer space. That's what I've been told.
Stuff that was nice.
Yeah, it sounds like a bad time. So it's like, but there's a lot
of
rocks
and metals, and a lot of it's man-made, right? It's all man-made. Is all man-made? Is all space junk human-made?
Okay.
Or can there be organic? Human-made.
So, yeah, probably, assumedly so. I mean, besides like, there's a falcon feather that was left on the moon, but that's
No, like I mean, like if a ancient asteroid has been broken up for 1,000 years and spinning around Earth's orbit, is that space junk, or is it only the satellites that get blown up through testing or destruction or whatever?
There's probably lots of both, but there's just satellites alone. So there's like 2,000 active satellites that are floating around right now, but then there's 3,000 dead satellites that are floating around, and tens of thousands of pieces of like larger than like a baseball.
Trackable. I think that's
trackable, like big enough to be tracked, because there's like hundreds of thousands or like millions of pieces of like tiny stuff. So like bigger than a millimeter, but smaller than a baseball. So like paint chips. I guess that's a really common one, is just like the paint that they have on boosters and on satellites and things like that. Stuff just rips off. And so paint chips are still actually really dangerous though. So I remember hearing that was like a single paint chip hit the window of a space shuttle at one point in time, and it cracked like 4 inches of it. Now, fortunately, like the windows are like 15 inches thick of whatever bulletproof material, basically. But it got through 4 inches worth because it got hit by a paint chip. Like, man, our tax dollars hard at work, right? But no,
everything's flying around everything's flying around so fast, I guess.
And right, like there's nothing slowing it down. So it's a paint chip, but it's traveling 17,000 miles an hour. And so if you're going in a different direction, like that paint chip is now pretty powerful.
Yeah, if you have the right type of orbit, it can start like it could really build up some speed. You know what I mean? It's like the way that it can interact with gravitational fields and stuff like that. It's amazing how fast it can get. But what you were talking about before about like, is all space debris human origin? I was looking that up, and I mean things like micrometeoroids is a term, and so if a team wanted to kind of,
limit it.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to move away from the human origin debris, discussion, then you could talk about micrometeoroids, cosmic dust, natural disintegration of asteroids. That could be what you're going for. But I think most people think of like human trash orbiting the Earth.
Right. And it's crazy. Starlink, the Elon Musk Wi-Fi around the Earth satellites that are going up. If this is just anecdotal, my own experience. I'm looking in the sky one day, and it looks like there's like a caterpillar of lights like flying through the sky. I don't know if you've ever seen that yet, but it looked like aliens.
Not since I went sober. No.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
No. It was real.
Smoking something.
I looked it up.
Not even the usual.
I wish I was smoking something.
Tell me about the caterpillar of stars that crawled across the sky. Matt.
When they launched Starlink satellites, they were launching like 50 things into the atmosphere at once. So they all come out looking like little lights in the sky in a perfect row, and it's not an alien apparently. So I mean that's what it was. I was like, I've never seen that before. So. And I guess it's common. Like if they're launching like tens of thousands of little mini satellites into the atmosphere to like be constantly everywhere around the globe, from what I understand. So it's probably it's one big thing that's happening right now is that Starlink system, which is like thousands and thousands of satellites or sub-satellites or something like that. They have a word for it, but
yeah. Oh, then they're called mega constellations that they're aiming for, so that there can be internet for all of
globally all the time.
So SpaceX is doing a lot of that, and I guess like Blue Origin, Amazon companies like working towards that too. So they're saying like the number of satellites in orbit is going to increase rapidly. The problem is now you have avoidance maneuvers are also increasing. So like a piece of a dead satellite, so either debris, because some countries have tested blowing up satellites in space, which just creates like thousands of pieces of satellite flying everywhere. So you got to track that. So besides those pieces, you also have old dead satellites that are floating around. But now you add thousands of new satellites that you want to work all at the same time, and you're dealing with a lot more avoidance. So on a topic like that, right? So the USFG should implement a plan to reduce space junk. The harms don't feel as like tractable as a typical round, where it's like, we want to increase the minimum wage. It's like, okay, lots of people aren't paid enough money, and that causes problems. Right. Everyone kind of gets that story. It's very tangible. But when you're talking about like, there's a danger to Elon Musk's mega billion-dollar global internet thing. Like, I don't care at all. I guess he can figure that out. Like, fly up there with like a Swiffer and just like clear stuff. I don't know. So it doesn't feel quite as impactful. But then you start thinking about like the stuff that can be done with satellites. You start thinking about like, space exploration we're adding more and more people into space. So there's the ISS that's had to like do maneuvers in the past to get out of the way of space junk. But we're going to be putting up more private space stations as well. And there would be more and more people living and working in space over time. So there's like a real element of human risk there. And there's manufacturing things that can only be done in space. So you can start getting into like these really cool opportunities that space affords and what it will be doing. And these all become a hindrance to that new opportunity. So it's a little theoretical, but it is still, some significant risk that is involved there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking up, I'm trying to find examples of real things that have happened. I saw something a couple of years ago about the International Space Station got, their robotic arm was damaged, but it's still functional. And I have a real hard time finding just really tangible stories that help illustrate the problem. Everything seems so potential. Everything seems so, possible and not actual yet. And so it makes it hard for you to build up a harms story to actually motivate people to do this. Yeah.
If you can get into cost and stuff. So like, oh, this is going to be really expensive, like, but it's already really expensive. And when you're dealing with like magnitudes in millions or billions of dollars, it becomes very difficult to start quantifying like, okay, well, a satellite that costs hundreds of millions of dollars is going to cost $40 million more. Like, why does that matter? So those things don't seem quite as like weighted to me when measuring this stuff out. But sorry, Matt, what you were gonna say?
Well, I mean, just to kind of go against what Jared was saying. Jared was saying that there's no evidence of it yet. At the very top of this, we were talking about how this is a good topic to go into the future with, because for the longest future, assuming there's still satellites being used, this is probably going to be a problem more and more as time goes on. I mean, the reason why there hasn't been a satellite problem for 1,000 years is because they've only been around for 50 or whatever. So, I mean, and Tim's told you the whole situation. There's 3,000 dead ones and 2,000 living ones, and there's 10,000 going up to be planned, and who knows, anyone who can get it up there can go launch a satellite. I mean, so
getting up is the hard part.
Yeah. I'm sure they're gonna be trickling in, and I have seen, like the International Space Station has been hit by small ones. It can withstand a certain amount of like small ones, and like Jared was saying, it has a tracking at a certain size and certain centimeters. They can literally move the space station to avoid it.
I think in addition to the harms being a problem, a harms story, and inherency, there you do have some problems with inherency, because so many governments are already talking about this and doing stuff. I'm like, so why is it that the United States needs to create a program? I mean, there's like an interagency space debris coordination committee already, there's international, there's national. They have, like people are on this right now. So what is it about this like an American program that makes it so absolutely necessary that it's not getting taken care of?
So I got like maybe a couple answers to that, because that is a tricky one. Like, it's still, a stock issue of the affirmative team to like prove that there's an inherent issue here. And while there's like things in motion to maybe work on it here and there, a lot of it is like the UN currently has a policy that countries have to harvest, like take back down their satellites within 25 years of them, of like the mission being completed. But who enforces that? Like, there are, 30 countries that have satellites at this point in time. And so it becomes this real manner of enforcement. So that's like, what do they call that? Attitudinal inherency, where it's like, yeah, we all agree that should be a thing, but no one is going to do it. Like, so we're not upholding that as a problem. So you can make the claim that like the US is launching significantly more satellites. Like, we've got more space agencies, private and public, like we're doing more in space. So that makes us, also we've got a space force. So that just makes us like the right actors to, I don't know, regulate something like that, to be able to say like, hey, you're going to be using any of our stuff, like unless you're entirely self-sufficient, which I don't know if there's really any like aerospace companies that are just entirely self-sufficient. Like, you can't use these other things. I think we could probably more reasonably put like embargoes and tariffs and regulations and things in place against entities like space entities if they don't comply with these things of like clean up your space junk.
Yeah. Well, so on the affirmative, like, there's those issues come up, and whenever that happens,
the affirmative being we should do something about the junk.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Whenever it's difficult to kind of tell a harms story or an inherency story, when it's hard to motivate people to act, sometimes I start dipping into like unorthodox strategies, right? Like, sometimes the plan text itself can be really engaging. Like if there was a program, and it's not necessarily, like, oh, the United States government's going to launch something, but the United States is going to set up a space debris bounty program, where it's kind of like, hey, if you collect, space debris, this is how much how much money you can make, or something like that. If you had, so you would set, it doesn't necessarily create all the inner workings, and they're not the ones launching it, but it's like, hey, if you want to do this, this is what that value is. It's like collecting cans in outer space, and redeeming them.
Like, the solvency of that gets tricky, right? Because it's like, we'll create a program that incentivizes people to do this thing. So you just got to be really mindful of like what harms you're actually setting up at the beginning. There's like, space junk is a problem and blah, blah, blah. And like, here's all the bad things it's going to create. But if you don't actually confirm that like your plan will solve those things, it's just like, plan will incentivize solving those things, then you get a little bit, sticky there. But the resolution doesn't say that you have to solve them, right? It just says we'll launch a program to reduce it.
Right. So,
So the
but even
government
then,
is
like grammatically, it's almost like you have to be effects topical.
kind
like
of, yeah, it sort of forced you into that. So
Yeah.
you just ended probably with like a really techie round where like the topics, you're like, yeah, okay, whatever, space junk. Like, who really cares? You were not actually meeting your stock issue of this and this and this for all these 3 reasons. I think that's probably my best defense strategy. Like if I'm in the prep room telling some kids like, all right, here's what we're going for, you're getting, 4 or 5 spec arguments. Like let's like do our best to pin down that this is a rough resolution to be topical and inherent and actually solve real harms.
Yeah. Or what if the program is that you set up space recycling centers?
So that's actually one of the things. The Federation of American Scientists have like a published list of like, here are 10 of our best ideas, and one of them is space recycling. And it's like taking materials found in space and repurposing them into other things necessary in space, because like there's limited resources in space. Like it's very, very expensive and difficult to get resupplies, but like if there's stuff already up there and like, hey, I really needed an Allen wrench or whatever, like your ability to then take stuff out of it. But apparently it's like ludicrously expensive. So they pose that it's like $1.4 billion for 1,500 pounds, or so I guess it'd be 15 tons. 15,000 pounds. So 15 tons of recycled material. Because like you got to capture it, but you got to capture it in a way that it doesn't damage the vehicle that catches it. And then you have to have the like, I don't know, smelting materials or something. Like you need to be able to turn a thing into another thing, like to reuse it. So. And Matt is your audio is not working.
Oh, okay.
What a nerd. So there's like a lot of interesting little solutions. So Jared, any other like crazy ones? Did we ask our good robot friend, like what would ChatGPT do to solve space debris?
I did. And there's one interesting one that I wanted to bring up, which is space debris art projects. So
it's not garbage. It's art.
It's not garbage. It's art. And so
we're just going to change the way we talk about it.
Yeah. And then it's not about like, oh, how much damage can this stuff cost to, people? It's kind of like, what opportunities do we have to make new and unique art? It has nothing to do with solving any problems. It's just about creating. It's just about being creative. And now you get to sidestep all the harms, all the inherency. That's I don't know. That'd be interesting to see that play out.
I like that. That's kind of
fun. I do think that like with the time remaining, we should kind of switch and get a little focus on what do you say on the negative. You know what I mean? And so,
Matt, it's mostly body language, anyways. We all know that's what calm is, so you got it.
Okay, so negative arguments. One of the things that come up, one of my first things is resource allocation.
Okay.
That to do a real debris removal program, that's going to be freaking expensive. And so rather than just doing it's not a cost, like people run cost disadvantages. You should call them resource allocation disadvantages, I think, because the impact isn't necessarily, and that costs too much. It's like, okay, that money's coming from somewhere. The likely culprit is going to be these things, right? So if NASA is like a science organization, then the likely thing that they're going to be pulling from is like, STEM education. Because they need to pay for it, or like some like grants
or like climate research or something.
Right. Yeah, that'd be a good one. Yeah. And
so like the things that we need to solve, like the problems that we need smart scientists working on, have bigger potential impacts than this. So it's like the opportunity cost of taking someone off of like green tech development or carbon recapturing or like carbon sequestration or something like that. Like scientists that are solving important things. Not that those are the same types of scientists, but like generally, if there's like a pool of so many scientific units of, I guess, like money that goes towards the sciences, if we're putting more and more into space debris, like, okay, is that solving as big of a problem as other space or other scientific related problems that need money to solve?
I also think that might be part of what would feed your anti-blackness critique, right? And so like, the the resources that are being used for this is a like really it is the realm of very, very wealthy white people. Like how many black astronauts have there been? And so that's just an illustration, but the people that are leading the charge to go into outer space typically aren't people of color. You know what I mean? And so I do think that kind of is consistent with that critique and can definitely fuel it.
Sure, and like it almost feels like finding some place to spend billions of dollars. Like,
right.
No one is in the streets screaming about like there's too much space junk. Like this is like a problem of billionaires. Like billionaires have this problem. Regular people all around the country don't. Also, like people of color particularly have significantly larger issues that are like really are pressing, and yet we're talking about like allocating billions of dollars to space junk. So that I think like just the rhetoric of it, I think is probably what ties into that critique a bit. So on the negative, I think also you can come up with some silly counterplans, I think.
Okay.
So there are like a number of different fun solutions to this. So things that have been thrown out there, like giant nets, like it gets to like Wile E. Coyote level stuff.
Okay.
So like giant nets or like magnets, or my personal favorite are like space laser rangers. So like having
lasers.
See, laser tractor beam. So it's like you shoot up a satellite that's sole job is to literally shoot lasers at other dead things. So at dead satellites and other like pieces of space debris. And I guess when a laser hits something and heats it up enough, that creates atmospheric drag. I have no idea how the hell that works, but that means that it ends up slowing down enough that it can re-enter the atmosphere. Like it breaks its orbital path. It falls back in the atmosphere and then burns up. So kind of neat that you have like a, I don't know, Sheriff Rick Grimes of space. Like, we're going to shoot down all of the zombie like telescopes and satellites and crazy stuff that's up there using lasers. Like that is some Buzz Lightyear shit. That's pretty cool.
Oh, that's weird. Okay. And so that would be a counterplan?
Yeah. So, I mean, whatever they do, you can do something different. Like,
okay, gotcha.
So if you want to just play the game, if you actually do want to play a space junk game, but they also tend to be a lot cheaper. So it's like that is the far and away of all of the various options that the Federation of American Scientists posed, that is the cheapest one, because I guess lasers it's just like energy that you're shooting at something. It's not like a physical thing. So there are others that are like shooting rockets at the space debris, which seems like it would just make more space junk, but it's like, it's not for the purpose of exploding it. It's the purpose of nudging it so that it like pushes it back in, like out of its orbit, its orbital path, so that it then goes in and burns up. But like, you can only bring up so much ammunition. So it's the like stormtrooper solution, like use lasers, like you just have infinite ammo. So like, I suppose if you can capture it from enough like sunlight and stuff, I don't know. But as they posed it, that is far and away, like by a huge order of magnitude, the cheapest solution is to just shoot lasers at space junk.
Okay, so if that were the counter plan, hear me out on the overall strategy. So you run an argument about the technological feasibility of removing space junk. You just say, we don't have the technology to do this. Okay. It's like you have this pie in the sky thing. So you're running a no solvency argument, and then you run the lasers counter plan. And they're like, what are you talking about? You just said that we don't have the technological capabilities. Now you're promoting space lasers. I'm like, yeah, pick your poison, man. You know what I mean? Either we're just gonna like go science fiction and I'm gonna win on science fiction, or I'm gonna win on science reality. We don't have the technology to do it. And so it's like kind of like bookending them so they have to choose one or the other. That's how weird I am.
Those are fun. I like multi directional neg strategies. I also think you could probably like you can play the just regular stuff of like you'll never be able to fund this, like you won't be able to sell it in times. Like you can go the normal routes of things. I like the avenue of like going for like space art. Are there any other neat ones that ChatGPT came up with of just like here's some silly stuff that we can do? Because like I think you can almost get to like a point of ridiculous. Like, you can get jesting in nature on like some of these topics that are just so wild.
some of the unique ones, the recycling centers was one of them. So and a space debris insurance market. That sounds kind of like a counter plan. So it's not really a program to remove space debris, but it's just like, hey, let's yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. That one's not all that.
Oh, sexy. Yeah. So that was University of Boulder, or University of Colorado Boulder posed a solution to that they called an orbital use fee. Okay. So it's like, in order to shoot something up and keep it in orbit, you're just going to have to pay for that space. So think about it, sort of like real estate, but like as long as you have something in orbit, that poses some potential risk. So I imagine it's a little bit like insurance, but like that poses the potential risk while it's live, and then afterwards, while it's dead, of like harming other things. And so that cost goes towards all of the expenses of like maneuvering. So it's like one way to kind of disincentivize those organizations that are just like sending up tens of thousands of satellites. Like, well, you're gonna have to pay for every one of those, because every time you add something into space, everybody else in space has to track it and like make sure that it's not going to hit them and they're not going to hit it. So, like a use tax. So kind of an interesting avenue to it. It's bland, but it's a neat idea. And they've got a bunch of like financials that break that down.
There were some ideas were space debris robot shepherds. Robot shepherds. Yeah. So like you launch up robots and they just fly around the orbit and they just collect stuff like shepherds, and they just kind of or they knock it, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like
nudge it back into orbit.
It's kind of like the lasers one, but I think using robots for it instead. One of them, like this one, is just, I don't know. I think ChatGPT was hallucinating on this. I don't quite understand it, but it's good for the last couple minutes. Debris transmutation.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, I'll read it for you. Explore the speculative idea of transmuting space debris into less harmful or inert materials through advanced technologies, whatever those may be. While this concept might seem futuristic, it could spark discussions about innovative solutions.
Yes, excellent. I like it. So the problem is, or the solution is, we solve it. Who's on board?
Yeah.
Do I have your vote?
Yeah, we apply energy to transmute debris into inert materials using, futuristic advanced technologies. And then
step 3.
Yeah. Oh man. Let's check in with Matt and let's see how he's doing. Hey Matt, how you doing?
Hey, can you hear me? I'm checking in from the backside of Uranus. You know what I'm saying? The reception's pretty bad back here.
We transmuted Matt into
It works. It seemed to work fairly well using advanced technology and sparked some interesting discussions.
Yeah, some space junk got in the way and blocked my connection, and so that was the reason.
That would be fun though, to just use big words that are meaningless and then it would just be a critique on debate.
I've talked about that so many times, because I feel like that's where like half of critiques goes. It's like just a word soup of like, here's a bunch of different theories, none of which really even interact with each other, but like it's a little bit like the emperor has no clothes. Like no one in the round wants to say that they don't get it. It's like, well, I get it, so obviously like it's kind of neat, but like no, actually there is no sense, there is no meaning to any of this, but no one wants to admit that they don't get it.
Yeah,
just like the International Space Station is not making contact with space junk, so this debate is not clashing point by point, but like two pieces of space junk in the night.
Just floating on by.
Oh man. What else? So, but I do like the idea of like, because one of my first things was like the things that are real threats coming from outer space would be like killer asteroids.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, does that count as space debris? Like, am I, like
no?
No.
No.
Have to be orbiting the Earth.
I just think, like, to Matt's very first question, I think I would just make the definition that yes, it has to be human created. Because otherwise it's like space,
man-made,
like material. It's like extra planetary risks. Like, and like asteroid defense, that's a real thing. Like, and we do have those programs, and it's super cool. And we probably like saved the world a couple times.
What if a giant meteor hit the Yucatan Peninsula 10,000 years ago? Okay, and let's say it blew some rocks up into space, and those rocks are circling around the orbit. Is that space junk?
No.
It came from Earth.
Didn't come from humans. Like it's like is it a human origin story, or is it?
I also don't know that stuff would still be like circling.
It's completely
like it would have to be like just
hypothetical. I have no idea about anything. I don't know anything.
I think that's the solution. Like that's this whole topic. No one really knows anything about anything on it. Like we can reference a couple things that a couple scientists put out there, but we're all just arguing over which, billionaire needs more parking.
You know what? My next strategy is flat Earth. You can't. There's no such thing as space.
Yeah, the junk will eventually just float off to one side or another.
There it is.
Like there is no spoon.
Yeah.
North, south, east, or west. Junk can only go so far.
You're not bending the spoon. You're bending yourself. All right. So, well, interesting discussion. A lot of sort of interesting science fiction stuff. We will continue to tackle issues like this into the future. We are Debate Sensei, Matt, Tim, and Jared. Thank you all very much. We will see you next time.